what makes for a great fight? It's an easy enough question, but after sitting on this video for over a year, I found out the hard way that it's got a really difficult answer. If there's one thing that's for sure though, it's this. When a fight's done right, you just know it when you see it. I think what's really interesting on this is I've talked to around 30 people about the film Batman vs Superman. I've met some who loved it, some who are indifferent about it, and some who despise that film with every fibre of their being. But one thing that all of those people unanimously agreed on is that the warehouse fight is the best Batman action sequence ever put to the silver screen. There's just something about it that resonates with everyone who sees it. It doesn't really matter if you're invested in the plot or what your tastes in tropes and genres are, because when you're in the cinema and you see this, you can't help but squirm in your seat and feel the weight behind that crate crack that guy's skull open. And if you're in the cinema and the action gets you moving around in your seat as you feel every last punch, you know you're watching a great fight. I mean, one of the things that I think's most curious about this is how people disagree all the time as to whether a film is good or bad, but when a truly great action sequence comes along, almost everyone agrees that that's the case. But what does make for a great fight? What are the devices and techniques you can use to evoke that guttural reaction and investment in the outcome from your audience? Well, I think a great place to start is, as a general rule, the less certain it is who'll win, the more gripping that fight gets. I look back to Titan in Infinity War, where the Avengers are trying to take down Thanos, and how much I was glued to my seat when I first saw that fight. And it wasn't the same kind of investment as that Batman vs Superman fight, where the choreography was really good and I felt the weight behind every punch. It was for a different reason, and I'm pretty sure that reason was because I knew that there was a very real chance that Thanos might actually win this, and that the heroes that we've come to care about might not just lose, but they might die. And as the Titan fight goes along, as Thanos wipes the floor with hero after hero, and that fear that someone we care about might die grows, that fight only grows more brilliant with it. And I'd argue that that Titan fight is the best action sequence that the MCU's given us so far, because of just how well it milks the audience's fear that Thanos really might win. And the thing is, we've all seen those action scenes before that are the perfect opposites of this, right? And they're just the most boring kinds of fights where the heroes do nothing but win, 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 and overcome every obstacle as if they're all only an inch tall. It's the fights where a hero has to struggle, where they lose control of the situation, where the plans fall to ruin and it looks like the villain really is about to win, only for the hero to come out victorious in the end by the skin of their teeth. Those are usually the most compelling fights. And when it comes to an example that I think best embodies this point, it isn't Infinity War or John Wick or any superhero movie, it's from the 2018 film Upgrade. And if you haven't seen Upgrade yet, you really should, because it's a really good action film. But the basic idea of this movie is the protagonist is just an average guy who's had an AI implanted in his skull, and it's advising him on how to be a badass, and that in itself is great. It's something we haven't really seen before, so that originality gives this fight that we're about to dissect some really good entertainment value. But what this fight we're about to look at does really well, and what I think is the number one lesson you can take away from it, is how well it does that shifting power dynamic. So the fight starts with Grey, our protagonist, in the corner when the bad guy walks in. He's behind him and Grey's got the element of surprise, therefore he's got the power, but he freezes. He's clearly never been in a fight before and he doesn't know what to do, so now he's lost his surprise as the bad guy turns around, throws Grey into a table and sucker punches him and just wipes the floor with him. And this right here is great. The audience is afraid for our protagonist as it looks like he's about to get his ass kicked or potentially even killed, and then Grey fights back with a right hook. Maybe he'll win, but no, it gets blocked and now Grey has even less power. The bad guy is getting even more likely to win as he starts choking Grey. But then in the all hope is lost moment, the AI calmly asks to take control of his body. Grey cries out permission granted, and his body, independent of Grey's will, proceeds to absolutely kick the guy's ass in this cathartic, fun twist of the fight. We indulge in the ass kicking for a while, but oh crap, the villain's got a knife, maybe he's gonna win, but oh no, Grey just calmly grabbed it and used it back on him and just continues to effortlessly beat his ass. And what I'd argue is the glue that holds this fight together and makes it just so bloody fun to watch, is that the power dynamic is handled so well. The originality is great, don't get me wrong. The fact that this reluctant guy has this AI just smashing drink glasses sunglasses into his head, and Gray's just gawking in horror at his hands as they do these things is just original and it's brilliant. But if from the very start of this fight, the AI has full control over his body, and from the very first punch the hero was just completely on top of things, then the fight would have been nowhere near as fun to watch as it was. That turning point in the middle where the AI takes control contrasts with the moments before where he was losing badly, and as a result it makes those moments of loss feel all the more heavy with dread, and those moments of victory feel all the more, well, victorious, for lack of a better word. But when we see the hero do nothing but win, that's boring. And when the villain does nothing but win too, that's also boring. The best fights are in the middle and are like a seesaw where the hero is winning in one moment, then the villain pulls out something unexpected and now he's about to win, and back and forth like that. But obviously a shifting power dynamic isn't everything. You can have a fight where the hero takes a hit, then the villain takes a hit, then the hero takes a hit, and then back and forth several dozen times, and it can still be really boring. And that leads us to the second rule for making a great fight, and it's this.
Oh no! Is that a buffering symbol? That's such a shame. Hang on, give me a sec. Oh, that's bad. Apparently this video's just been blocked in your region. I guess you'll never know what Rule 2 was. That's so annoying. I can scarcely imagine how annoying that must be for you. If only you'd installed NordVPN, the sponsor of today's video, then this crisis could have been totally averted. I don't know about you, but I hate region blocks with just every fibre of my being. Like, you know when you're browsing the internet and you come across a page that you kinda wanna watch, but then it turns out it's blocked in your region, and now you really wanna watch it? Like, before you would have spent like 2 minutes looking at it and then you just clicked away, but now it turns out that someone said no, and you're not allowed to see this thing. I'm looking at You Last Week Tonight, which is hosted by an Englishman, but is for some reason banned in England anyway, for no reason whatsoever. Thank you very much, John Oliver. Anyway, rant over. And if you're just like me and you're like, well, now I want to watch that thing more than anything else in the world, thank you very much. Well, my rebellious friend who's also liked and subscribed, today is your lucky day, because if you click that link in the description, that's nordvpn.com/thecloserlook, or use my code thecloserlook at the checkout, you'll get unparalleled freedom to watch all that weird shit you'd never be able to otherwise see. And if you use my link or code, you'll get 70% off a 3-year plan, plus a month extra on free, which is very cool, might I say. And no, me buying this green screen hasn't made me go mad with enthusiasm to the point that my use of it's maybe a little bit excessive. And yes, if you click that link in the description, that's nordvpn.com/thecloserlook, or use my code thecloserlook at the checkout, you'll get yourself 70% off a 3-year plan and a month extra for free. That's a very good deal. You should do it. You should do it. Do it. See, I'm a nice guy, so I'm going to lend you my Nord subscription so you can watch the rest of this video. And is it? There we go. You can watch the rest now. But I'm not going to be around for the next region block you come across, which means the next time you come across something that says, no, we hate your country. We don't let people from your country watch our stuff because we hate you. I'm not going to be there to help you, unfortunately, so you're going to have to buy Nord if you want to watch any more region block stuff. Anyway, back to the video.
And that leads us to the second rule for making a great fight, and it's this. Variety is king. I mean, that Batman fight was fun to watch. Him throwing that box and cracking that bad guy's skull was evocative as all hell. But what if, immediately after, Batman used that exact same move again, and achieved the exact same effect of hitting that guy's head and splattering a little blood onto the wall? I bet that second usage would have not only been, like, far less evocative than the first, but it would have cheapened that first use as well. When you're approaching a fight, as a general rule, you should never use the same move twice. And this rule's a big one, I think. It's one that's really worth trying to adhere to, because far too many boring fights I've seen are boring because they're just so repetitive as the same move is used over and over again to the point that it numbs the audience's senses. And when it comes to adding variety into your fight, it's a lot more nuanced than just having people use different kinds of punches and kicks. For example, if you're writing a sci-fi with advanced technology, then in your fight you should come up with several creative ways to use that tech for surprising fight moves that the audience didn't see coming, but in hindsight for the audience make perfect sense as they're not only effective fight moves, but they're also totally unforeseen. For example, if you've got a space-based gun designed to take out alien ships, the aliens don't use singular large ships, rather millions of tiny ones that all swarm in close proximity. And this gun's designed so once it hits a small ship, it violently tears apart all the particles in close proximity to that ship, and as a result, it takes out whole swarms. It's a cool gun, but what happens if you use that tech in a way that it wasn't designed for, but also totally works? For example, firing it at the enemy planet and with one shot, turning the entire planet's crust into molten slag, like in Ender's Game. In the climax of Ender's Game, Orson Scott Card uses an unpredictable application of a previously established weapon, and consequently it makes that end fight all the more engaging. It's the unexpected twists and turns in a fight that are the highlights that people remember long after they put down the book or left the cinema, and those moments are often what elevates a fight into being a great one. If you're writing with a magic system, the exact same rule applies. Hopefully before this point in your story, you've established how your magic works, so in this fight, it's a great idea for your characters to apply it in several different creative ways that the audience wasn't expecting, yet when they happen, they're a cathartic surprise as they adhere to the rules of the system and make for a really effective yet shocking fight move. And if you're not making a sci-fi with fancy guns or a fantasy with out-of-this-world magic and you're just using everyday weapons in an everyday setting, this still applies for you. A great example of how it still does would be in Jason Bourne. People don't really consider stationary as being a lethal weapon, but when Jason Bourne grabs a biro in a fistfight and uses it to stab the bad guy with lethal precision, it's kind of similar to that twist in Ender's Game, because it's an effective move, but it's also a highly original one that shocks in this memorable, fun twist of the fight. And while we're talking about variety in a fight, I'm, as per usual, being a bit of a devil's advocate here, because the other day I was listening to Brandon Sanderson's writing lectures, and he said something about fight scenes that, well, I disagree with.
Now we've got a problem we're approaching in writing action sequences in a book, and that is that our culture is now saturated with visual media, and visual media is really good at action sequences, all right? Really, really good. For example, you can have an action sequence in a movie that is basically 20 minutes of Jackie Chan kicking people, and occasionally throwing a hammer at them, right? What would happen if you wrote in a book 1/6 of your book being that fight sequence? Well, it would be this. Yeah, go.
And he kicked again.
And he kicked again. And then he kicked him in a different, cooler way. And then he kicked him with his other foot and dust flew off. And then the problem you're going to run into is, in a film, blow by blow is fun. In a book, blow by blow is not as fun.
Now, massive respect to Sanderson and his writing lectures. He gives out some really good advice, but on this, I respectfully disagree, because blow by blow is bad, period, in both film and the book. I mean, in that clip, he's right in most of what he said. Film is just better at depicting action than the book, and blow by blow in a novel where the same fight move repeats over and over again is much more boring than that same fight might be on film. But that doesn't mean it's not boring in a film. It's just slightly more tolerable for a viewer to watch than a reader to read. I mean, if you've ever watched a Jackie Chan fight, you'll know it's a lot more than just 20 minutes of him kicking people and occasionally throwing a hammer. If his fights were just that, he wouldn't be the action legend that he is today. Instead, he uses the surrounding area and the objects in it in creative ways with that variety that we just talked about. For example, when he grabs the ladder and beats 3 guys up with it by smacking a guy's legs with the end of it, then folding it out and hitting a guy with the other half, and then trapping the last guy inside of it, and while he's looking around totally confused, Chan punches him through the hole. Every one of Jackie Chan's fights has dozens of moments like this, where he takes boring everyday things and uses his creativity to turn them into lethal weapons. And the thing is, I firmly believe that most Jackie Chan fights out there could be converted into a great section of prose, where, sure, you wouldn't describe every single hit in exhaustive detail. If you did, that would just be really boring fiction, but you might instead summarize 20 seconds of the fight in one line by calling calling them a flurry of hits, then go really in detail and describe the highlights where they move around an area and use the props in these fun, creative ways. I am 100% sure that it can be done. Like, I know a good writer can take a Jackie Chan fight and figure out a way of converting it into a perfectly fun and enjoyable bit of prose, because there are so many imaginative moments and bits of variety that Chan's already injected into that fight. But to prove my point that Blow by Blow is just universally bad, here's a great example from John Wick 3. So, I saw it in the cinema last year, and the fight scene with Halle Berry and her dogs came up, and it went like this. We see our heroes take cover and then shoot a few baddies, then the dogs bite some baddies, and while the dogs grapple them and distract them, our heroes shoot them in the head. Then our heroes take cover and shoot some more bad guys. Then the dogs bite some other bad guys, and while the dogs distract them by biting them, our heroes shoot them in the head. Then our heroes shoot some more bad guys for 30 more seconds, and then the dogs appear, grapple some more baddies, and while they bite them and distract them, our hero shoots them in the head. And it was at this point in the cinema where my eyes drifted towards the ceiling and I started thinking about what I wanted for dinner. I was fairly sure I had some ravioli in the fridge. No, I definitely did. Oh, and if I could get some tomatoes and make a nice sauce with that, oh, that would be quite delicious. And I needed to get some milk. And then I heard a scream. I snapped out of my daydream and oh, look, the dog just leapt and bit a guy in this fun stunt. Alright, cool, I'm reinvested in the fight. I see the dog bite another guy, but that time, instead of the arm, like all the other dozen times, he instead bit him in the balls. And then Halle Berry shoots him in the head while he is distracted. Okay. And then soon after, the dog bites another guy, and then John Wick shoots him in the head while he's distracted. And then... where was I? Right, I needed to buy some bread. Do you see where I'm coming from when I disagree with Sanderson in that Blow by Blow is just bad generally? I mean, John Wick is full of some really good fights with interesting, imaginative beats in them. I mean, the first John Wick is one of the best action films I've ever seen, but that specific fight in the third one didn't evoke these guttural, physical reactions from me that any great fight should. Instead, it bored me so much that I spent more time daydreaming and going through my shopping list than I did looking at the screen. And the reason why it was so unengaging was because it was so extensively repetitious. And if they instead came up with some variety, some more imaginative ways of using dogs in a gunfight, that fight would have been considerably more engaging for it. Whether you're an aspiring novelist or you're making films, you should know that Blow by Blow is always a bad way to go. It just is. You can get away with it slightly more in the visual form than in the written one, but it's just the most boring way of doing an action scene. Always vary what's going on in your action, never let your fight stagnate, and as a general rule, never use the same move twice. But here's the thing. Yes, having variety in a fight where each blow spices things up is great. Yes, having good blocking and easy to understand choreography is great too. Yes, having the ebbs and flows of a shifting power dynamic is also nice to have. But in my opinion, all of those things are secondary. I mean, they're definitely good to have. Your fight will be better if you've got them. But if you fail to have what I'd argue is the most important ingredient, your fight will lack that investment from your audience that you desperately want to have. And it's this. You're telling a grand story with characters and a plot and pacing, and what I think is the most grievous error that most writers and directors out there fall for when it comes to the fights, is they forget this. I mean, when you're outlining your plot, you want every scene to somehow push things forward. Every last one of your scenes should somehow serve a crucial role in advancing the overall story. You wouldn't have a random dialogue exchange that does nothing to serve the plot, or the characters, or the world building, the kind of scene that has no reason for being there, so as a result it just bogs down the plot. You wouldn't add in such a dialogue exchange, so why should you treat fight scenes any differently? If you can only take 1 point away from this video today, please let it be this one. Your fight scene has to serve the story in some way, and for the love of God, it cannot be because there hasn't been a fight scene in 20 minutes and the audience is going to get bored, so you're having a fight scene for a fight scene's sake. Please don't do that. Maybe it marks a crucial point in your main character's arc, and they make a decision in the fight that illustrates how far they've come. Maybe it marks another beat in the plot as the characters have a revelation that unravels a part of the main mystery, or something along those lines. And only once it serves the overall story in some invaluable way, only once that's out of the way should you start start thinking about choreography and the fight moves and the variety and all of the rest. I mean, here's a great example to prove my point. In Star Wars A New Hope, I think it's fair to say that the Obi-Wan Darth Vader fight scene itself is pretty lacking. It's just two people tapping sticks together as they talk, and it fails in pretty much all of the points that we've covered so far. The fight doesn't have a shifting power dynamic, it doesn't have variety. However, this fight is iconic. It's arguably one of the most iconic fights in movie history, and the reason why is because while on its own the fight might be pretty tame, as a part of an overall story, it serves its role beautifully. Up until this point, Obi-Wan's been the mentor, he's been the guy who held Luke's hand and kept him safe and guided the way, but now, as a result of this fight, spoiler warning, Obi-Wan is dead, and the whole dynamic of the trilogy has irreparably shifted. From this point on, Luke's alone in his story. He has to be independent and figure this Jedi stuff out without any help, and it's all because of this fight. This fight scene is an indispensable part of not just this movie's story, but the whole trilogy's story. Sure, it would have been nice if Lucas hired some sword experts to give it some better choreography, but this fight does the main thing a fight needs to do, so it works perfectly well. Another great example of a scene that does this is the church fight in Kingsman: The Secret Service. When people talk about this film, they'll quickly point out how the whole thing is filmed like it's one take, so it's more immersive, and how the action is brutal and full of variety, and yes, that's part of the reason why the fight's so good, but the hidden glue that makes this action so compelling is the fact that it's such a seamless beat in the overall plot. So far in this film, the villain Valentine has been scheming and plotting to give away his SIM cards for free and get everyone to use them, but the viewer hasn't figured out why yet. It's this mystery element that this film's been building up. Not only does this scene answer that mystery, but it delivers that answer in a thoroughly fun way. I mean, we could have had Harry find a blueprint for the device and then give us the exposition where he just tells us Valentine's plan. Or we could have been shown that information in an entertaining action-packed scene that shows instead of tells and lets the viewer figure it out all on their own. If I were writing that script, I know which one I'd rather pick. Also, it does more than just reveal the mystery. It marks the death of Harry, who's been the mentor figure, and now Eggsy has to go on without him and figure all this spy stuff out for him. Hang on, I'm getting a bit of deja vu here. I swear I've seen this somewhere before. I can't put my nose in it. I wonder where they got that one from. But if I had to boil this point down into one tweetable sentence, a wink wink nudge nudge, if you're writing a fight scene, and once the fight is over, nothing has changed in the status quo, then you have a bad fight, because it doesn't serve the story, it only serves itself. But what do you think? Am I right or am I wrong? What does make for a great fight? I'd love to know what you think in the comments down below. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please do check me out on Patreon if you haven't already, and I've got a bunch of cool rewards and you could help me make more of these videos. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time on The Closer Look.